Hey, hey, hey. Thank you for coming out and joining us on another episode of The Color of Truth. We have a very special guest today. We're going to be talking about mama's babies, daddy's maybes. We'll be covering a case for paternity fraud and talking about um, different paternity testing, laws surrounding paternity tests, why it's important for children to know their heritage, and then also how men can avoid the paternity trap. So before we go ahead and get started, I'm going to go ahead and introduce my lovely co-host. How are you today, Miss D?
I am fantastic. I am really, really looking forward to this conversation. I'm on my kick about the whole family court system and everything that surrounds it. So I am really, really excited about this conversation today. We're going to talk about some paternity fraud. So I'm just ready to get into the conversation. I'm ready. I'm excited.
Nice, exciting. It's so exciting. We're really, really blessed to have Mr. Carnell Smith come out and join us today. Before we introduce Mr. Smith, before I let Ms. D tell you a little bit about him and then bring him on so that he can tell you about himself, we're going to play this quick little video to give you an overview about Mr. Smith and the work that he's done so far. So I'm going to go ahead and share the video. See if we can get it started.
Can you make it bigger?
I ended up getting a bill that frees men who've been.
Oh, see, here we go with the struggle streaming now. Wait a minute.
Okay.
All right.
Hey, but you're good though.
All right, here's a question today. Should a man ever be forced to pay child support for another man's baby? Now, Carnell Smith calls himself Man for Justice and says that he is tired of seeing women fraudulently trap men and get away with what he calls the perfect crime. Take a look.
Paternity fraud is a big problem. It has already happened to over 1 million men. In my case of paternity fraud, my ex-girlfriend called me one day and told me that she was pregnant. And I told her, congratulations. I hope you and your baby's daddy be very happy. But then she says, but you're the father. I paid child support for 11 years before I found out the child wasn't mine. I was cuckolded. Cuckolding is the term that the cuckoo bird lays its egg in another bird's nest and lets another bird raise its young. I got 2 DNA tests. Once I found out that the child wasn't mine, I contacted my lawyer and says, I'm not going to pay her another dime. My ex-girlfriend asked the court specifically to put me in jail and make me pay the money that I had not paid. That infuriated me. When I went to court, I felt that at that point, I should be able to win my case with 2 DNA tests. I didn't lie here. We can prove I didn't lie, and we can prove who did. And the judge says it's my fault that I didn't find out sooner. It's pay or go to jail. That was a bit hard to take. I appealed that to the Georgia Court of Appeals. They refused to let me appeal it. I refer to paternity fraud as the perfect crime because the victim gets blamed for the conduct of the other party. I never felt like giving up the fight. I was very effective in advocating position for the Georgia paternity fraud victims. I ended up getting a bill that frees men who've been falsely accused of a pregnancy they didn't commit. My tagline is, if the genes don't fit, you must acquit.
Love that tagline. If the genes don't fit, you must acquit. So what everybody just watched was the story of a man named Carnell Smith, who basically was a victim of paternity fraud. But what they didn't know was that this man was determined to gain his financial freedom. So he actually took a case all the way up to the Supreme Court. He actually got a law passed in Georgia, HB 369, that allowed for the termination of parental rights based on DNA. He's a leading expert and international consultant and spokesperson on paternity fraud. He authored the book Trapped by Law. If you have not read it, please read this book. So he authored that book. He consulted on legislation in multiple states. He has appeared on multiple networks to include ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN. He's been in Time Magazine. And of course, you all just saw he was on Dr. Phil as well. and along with many other networks. He actually founded the former organization Citizens Against Paternity Fraud, and it is my pleasure to welcome Mr. Carnell Smith, Paternity Coach, to the panel. Mr. Carnell Smith, welcome to the show.
Hey, Roxy D, good evening. Hey, thanks for sharing that promo clip from Dr. Phil. Very much appreciated.
Oh, no problem. I love your story. First, like I said, first time I saw you on Mr. Palmer's show. And so I was like, oh my God, this guy's got a great story. This story has got to be out there for anybody who doesn't know it. Then when I saw you on Gale at Night, I said, okay, the universe is really speaking to me. We've got to talk about this topic. So it is a pleasure to have you on the show to actually tell your story and actually what you experienced during your case of paternity fraud.
Yes. Well, thank you. So as you know, my tagline is, if the genes don't fit, you must quit. Now that has been expanded now to where I am the paternity coach, and I help women, men, and families address family identity issues using DNA, law, and advocacy. So my story began just as you heard in the promo clip. It started with a phone call. My ex-girlfriend dialed the wrong number. She called me instead of her baby's daddy, and then led me into believing that the child was mine. And it took me 11 years to figure out I had been hoodwinked, fugabooed, tricked, deceived, and lied to. Yeah, it was definitely mama's baby, but it wasn't my baby. And 2 DNA tests says that's a pregnancy I didn't commit.
So what made you question the paternity?
Well, first, there was the initial issue was with my older sister, and she broke the girl code. My older sister let me know that ladies and girls sometimes are dating multiple guys and juggling them, and they'll get pregnant and they will pick the father after they have conceived. I was like, wait a minute, that sounds like post-conception paternity selection. She said happens all the time. She says you guys think that the girls won't do stuff like that because you bought into that notion about sugar and spice and everything nice. He says they just slick with it.
Right. And that is such a true statement. I've been saying that for decades about women, and we've gotten to a place where women have played this ultimate victimhood role. Mm-hmm. And we do some of the most egregious, engage in some of the most egregious acts. And there are things that we do that actually damage the lives of individuals. And we feel no remorse for it. And paternity fraud is just one of those things.
Yes.
And oftentimes it's intentional. Oftentimes it's because, this father would be a better provider or whatever the case may be. Oftentimes it's a trap. You have the turkey basting babies. You may not want to believe those stories exist, but they exist. So there have been multiple men that have been trapped into parenthood. And one of the issues I had when they overturned Roe were women talking about how, well, if that's the case, men need to step up, men need to step up. And I said, well, what do you think child support is? Men have been stepping up. That's exactly what child support is. But them overturning Roe and it's no longer federally protected just means you're on the same level playing field as him now, because he never had the decision-making process. He was never able to determine when he became pregnant. If you decided, when he became a parent, if you yourself made the unilateral decision to bring that baby to term. So when you factor in the idea that there is intentional paternity fraud, it just makes it that much more sickening. So again, I'm glad you are here to tell your story about paternity fraud, and we do definitely want to talk about some of the things that you can do to prevent it. But before we go there, I just want to hear a little bit more about this story. So how did you go about taking this case? So you find out that you've taken the DNA test you gotten your suspicions.
Well, actually, it wasn't just my suspicions. Okay. It was my pastor's father. And he was a good family friend. And I was actually paying for my former daughter to take piano lessons at his house. And his daughter was our music director at the church. And my former daughter used to be in the kids' plays, and she's very creative. And but he said, after I had so much difficulty in being able to get to see the child, her mother refused to abide by the court order and let me see the child on my court-ordered parenting days. And then she sued me for more child support based on a conversation she had with her girlfriends. She says, I've been talking to my girlfriends and you don't pay me enough child support. I'm like, what? What do I care about your, first of all, why do I care about what your girlfriends have to say or think?
Girl
And number
code.
two, I don't pay bills based on what they think or you. At that point, I was paying her child support without a court order because you know what we keep hearing around the country and across the nation and other countries. We want men to be responsible. So here's what happens. So if men and boys step up to the plate, start paying child support for a child before they confirm that they actually caused the pregnancy, just based on her word, he is in danger to get caught in a legal trap. Because if he takes her word, it can and will be used against him later. So my pastor's father said, you need to take this DNA test because once my child support got raised up to 40% of my take home pay, it caused some problems in my immediate household. And let me say this to you, Roxy and D. If you're salaried like I was, already working 60 hours a week and you're on call 24/7, there's no option to get another job.
Right.
There is no working overtime. I was salaried. You hear what I said? So whether I got it done in 8 hours or I got it done in 14 hours, I didn't get any extra, okay, except for
Right.
the $5,000 a year that I got for being on call. So when I put all of that together, he says, you need to take that test. I took the test expecting to prove to him that the child was mine. You can see
Wow.
my complexion, right? I am fairly highly melanated, you could say, right?
Just a little.
Yeah. And the child was also highly melanated. And I wear glasses. The child wear glasses. And I had, in the whole 2.5 years I had dated her mom, I never knew about her to tell a lie one time. So even though I broke up with her, I had no reason that I knew to doubt her. I asked her a couple of times and at the hospital, I said, you sure this baby's mine? She said, absolutely. I said, well, I'll sign these papers, but if you think this is going to start our relationship over again, you crazy. I said, I'll take care of the baby. I'll cover the medical and all that stuff. I set up a college fund for her. I maintained a separate wardrobe. But the thing that just rubbed me was that child support getting raised so high that it was more than my house payment. And that if those payments remain where they were, I wasn't going to be able to keep my house. So my wife and my newborn baby would be looking at becoming homeless. I get those test results back and they say 0.0% Carnell Smith is excluded as the biological father of this child. And I took a legal test. I understood the difference between a legal test and a home test right away. And when I got those results, it was like getting punched in the gut. I said, wait a minute, but that's not what her mother said. How could she lie like that? And after I got over the sadness part, I was like, man, this is never going to be the same again. I've been fighting to see a kid that's not mine. And now I'm trapped and my family's going broke. And, when you're paying your lawyer $265 an hour and your salary is $55 an hour, you can't keep that fight up indefinitely. Okay.
Absolutely.
Look, you see my scales behind me, right? Which one has the advantage? She didn't have to pay for an attorney. She got one for free.
Right.
I had to pay for one.
Sponsored by you.
And by the way, my tax dollars helped pay for the attorney that she got.
My tax dollars too.
Yes.
Right.
So, to collapse this story, I'm thinking, wait a minute, there's no way she didn't know she'd been involved with someone else during the window of conception. And I thought my contraceptions had failed. So since I'd never known her to lie, then that meant, that Okay, this is my baby. She said it's my baby. She's never lied that I know of. That DNA test says we have uncovered a lie. And let's shine the spotlight here. Carnell Smith didn't lie here. I'm guilty of doing the right thing for the wrong woman. Now, should that be a prosecutable offense for 18 to life, pay or go to jail, and if you ever get behind more than $2,501, you're facing a felony child support abandonment conviction.
Absolutely.
So that's prison. My attitude on this was, well, wait a minute. Okay. She either lied on purpose or she made a mistake. But either way, this is her problem. And on my side, we said, well, we're going to ask if she'll still let us see the child, because I loved her. My family loved her. She's been a part of our life for 11 years. Hey, we'd still like to see her, and we'd still like to do things for her on one condition. As long as we get to see her, we'll spend money on her directly. Mm-hmm. We'll never put another dime in your hand. Well, her mother's attitude was, no. You can see her if you pay for supervised visitation, and no, you can't pay outside of the court order. I was like, look, here's my mic drop moment. I'm done.
And the audacity.
And by the way, I subpoenaed her mother, her girlfriend, and her brother, and then I found out she actually got pregnant 6 weeks after I broke up with her.
Really?
That is not the story she told. Now, I'm an engineer by trade. I know a whole lot of math. I mean, calculus, we do all kind of formulas, but with some simple math, if you just had told me that it was between me and Chad or Ray Ray or Snooky or Snoop Dogg, Poo Poo, whatever his name is, I would have been able to tell that, no, we needed to get a paternity test. And I'm not signing nothing, which is tantamount to admitting you did it without proof.
Right.
Well, I get to court and the judge says, well, it's your fault you didn't find out sooner. Can you imagine the look on my face? I said, well, Your Honor, the only way a man would know that there was someone else is a couple of ways. Number one, if he watched the guy impregnate her. Now, that guy would know already something's up. Okay, strike, rule that out. Number two, he hired a private investigator and he had full-time surveillance on her, because that's how you catch a cheater. And you got to make sure that you hire a woman to follow around, because sometimes if you hire a guy, mess around there, your PI is cheating with her too. Hey, all kind of crazy stuff.
That's not funny, but it happens.
Hey, in Michigan, a judge actually cheated with the guy's ex-wife, and the judge on the case was having relationships with the guy's wife. So nothing surprises me.
Absolutely, it happens.
Now look, I'm not, throwing smoke at all ladies here, okay? But when that judge said what he said, I disagreed with his ruling. I said, well, there must be a way to overturn this. And I actually found several cases in my state where guys had won. And I referenced those cases. I appealed to the state court of appeals, to the state Supreme Court. And by this time, I've started a legislative reform effort with my state representative, who, as God made it possible, this guy was in my neighborhood. I walked to his house for Christmas and told him the story about paternity fraud and how easy it was for anybody to put him or his son on a child support order. That's how the legislation got started. So while the legislation path is going forward, my case is going up through the courts. I introduced the data to the courts and to the legislators that roughly 30% of the men and boys who got tested in Georgia turned out to not be the fathers. And we don't have proof that all of them were let go. I
30%.
filed. Yes.
So basically 1 in 3 men.
1 in 3, that's men and teen boys.
Wow.
The reason you hear me still around today, even though I've been out of this for a long time, is I don't want to see men and boys and the women who love them suffer from jail and prison, because it will completely upset and destroy their lives. And one of my clients actually committed suicide over his paternity fraud story because he married his high school sweetheart and she was simply scandalous. Long story short, this whole thing, while I'm still doing two things at the same time, I figured out a strategy on my own. I said, well, since judicial discretion means the judge can ignore my 2 DNA tests that prove that's a pregnancy I didn't commit, and it's independently verifiable, not because I said so, but because 2 different DNA labs that with legal test results prove I had nothing to do with the creation of that baby. And the only reason this child knew me is because her mother lied to me. Her mother lied to her. Her mother lied to her own attorney. Her mother lied in the courtroom. Now, where I come from, you do not reward bad behavior. And paternity fraud has all kind of smacks of bad behavior.
That's how you raised at home.
Exactly. Now, look, I'm willing to concede if you make a mistake. But you know what the adult thing to do is, when you find out you make a mistake, you correct the mistake. You don't exploit the mistake and say, ha ha, Your Honor, I tricked him fair and square and he didn't figure it out. And your job, judge, is to get me my money. Now, I know how I felt like that. I felt on the receiving end of that. It's fraud. And by the way, I've gone too far. Everybody in your audience needs to know why we call it paternity fraud. Mothers and teen girls, they go to child support court for money. And they are not required to submit any proof that the guy that they claim caused the pregnancy, they don't have to submit any proof that he did it. Her word on a statement or affidavit is, you are presumed guilty.
Thanks to Title 4D.
Yes. And my position on reform is then we need to change the law so that the family court judge can't ignore irrefutable scientific evidence that that man or boy didn't cause the pregnancy. And you know what? The legislators in the state of Georgia and Florida and several other states, I provided them with draft legislation and some educational support. They agreed. Because guess what? In this age where so many women say they want equality, well, you can't skip equal responsibility. You can't skip equal accountability. Come on, ladies, if you want to go out there and do like the men, I'm down with you. You can have as much fun rolling in the hay as you can handle. And as much as you can stand up straight and walk the next day. Go for it, girl. You do you. However,
just so they don't hit you up with toxic masculinity, let me say it on your behalf. Women, unilateral decision making comes with unilateral responsibility. In order to be equal to men, you have to be willing to suffer the consequences of men. And until you're willing to suffer the consequences of men, you will not be equal to men. You weren't even designed to be equal to men. Mm-hmm. And I think the biggest problem is, in this environment where we're pushing for single motherism is being applauded, this whole strong, independent thing. And don't get me wrong, I understand why people feel the need to not be dependent. Everyone should know how to survive on their own. You're not guaranteed to have anybody. So in the moments in your life where you don't have anybody, you need to know how to feed yourself. You need to know how to run your household. So you need to know how to be independent in those moments. But it's gotten to the point where women have built this facade around equality, and what they're really asking for is special privileges. Because anytime you can just write somebody's name down on some welfare benefits and say this is who the father is, knowing full well there are women out there who know for a fact that they never slept with this man. There are women out there who know for a fact that they've never even physically met this man. And even when they have, even in your story, you made the point that you assumed that maybe the contraceptive didn't work. That was another problem that I had. Anytime a man is wearing contraceptive, because that's another argument that women had, he should have wore a condom. If the man did wear a condom, that is evidence of avoidance. So even if the contraceptive breaks, this man should still be entitled to make a decision in his life, and he doesn't. But then you add insult to injury, come to find out he wasn't the only one whose contraceptive didn't work, and now there's another potential father.
Well,
but they normally pick the best candidate for the job. So that's a compliment.
Yes.
Honestly, you were the best candidate for the job.
Well, on one hand, that could be received as positive, but that's not something. Look, these words, "I'm pregnant and you are the father," these are not words any man ever wants to hear from an ex anything.
You're right.
When it says X, in my view, it should be in the rearview mirror. I'm going this way, and that's from my past, and that's where it stays. When I told her, I said, "Listen, if you see me again in the future, if you choose to speak, I'm fine. Hey, hi, bye, no problem, okay? Because I said I'll take care of the baby now. But if you think this is going to restart a relationship with you, and by the way, there are women who do this, they will." Because see, I asked this question. I said, well, seeing as how I was using contraception, all right, I'll concede maybe I'm in that less than 1% that failed, but why didn't you tell me you stopped taking your pills? She said that was none of your business. I was like, oh,
That's part of that my body, my choice.
yes. So I have some very, I'm gonna say not cold-blooded, but firm strategies for men and boys to guard themselves against the 4 false accusations. So we'll talk about that in the solution phase. All right. But ultimately, as I went through, it took me 1 year and 2 legislative sessions, and I managed to get 163-0 support in the House of Representatives in Georgia.
That's what's up.
And 45-5 in the Senate, and the governor, who I had talked to a year prior, because he told me, says, "I hear what you're saying about the problem, but there's nothing I can do about it from the executive branch level until a bill comes across my desk." I said, "Understood, I'll be back." Now, does that sound like somebody that is defeatist attitude, quit, give up easy? That's not how I was raised. Look, I got a whole lot of military folks in my family. I got opportunities to serve. I just chose to go about it, my career another way. I had great offers from several branches, and I just chose to go to a university that would let me get to electronic engineering in 3 years instead of 4. So I think that kind of influenced my being selected too, because at the time that she met me, I actually met her at one of my clients' parties. See, I was an engineer by day and I was a DJ by night, and I had 8 crews of DJs working for me and my partners. And we charged $200 an hour. It was quite lucrative business, and I was able to pay off most of my student loans in 1 year after I graduated. So I think the fact that I had 2 cars, 3-bedroom house, fireplace, engineer job, and I was able to live off my part-time money, and I had a roommate, so I kept my bills and expenses low. She had no idea how much money I really had.
But you were the best candidate, and it's not a laughing matter. But that's what it is. You were the best candidate at the time.
Yes. Well, after getting that legislation passed, during the journey, CBS Early Show and several other news crews followed me around while I was lobbying, and I was talking to them about the issue and says, wait a minute, if you think it's only me, or you think it's only a low-income minorities, because some of the opposition to the legislation said, oh, this doesn't need any legislation. You should leave it up to the judge. I says, we tried that before. Too many of the judges will ignore the truth and stick up a false chivalry to try to protect a woman from the responsibility of an issue that she caused.
Because their salaries are dependent upon it.
thanks to Title 4D and those bonus incentive payments for the child support enforcement program. And in the in the whole 2 years I was doing research while I was lobbying, I got a chance to study the Social Security section, the demon section 666, Title 4D, and Section 458, how they provide bonuses to the states for just collecting the number of paternities. So there is nowhere in those federal laws written that they have to be accurate paternities established. So
they have to be on paper.
They've come up with some very slick ways to get paternities established, because once you can get a paternity established, you have a legal authority to go after him for support. And by the way, that's the one time you can get a minor locked into an enforceable legal agreement that his family would then help him pay. So who's also getting ripped off at that point? Yeah.
Right.
So these bonuses, I looked at a couple of the metrics, and the metrics say they must improve the number of paternities that they establish year over year. No quality control that says they must get the right one. It says they just got to get one. So in every state, they have some of the cutest names for this program. They call it the Papa Opportunity Program, the Voluntary Acknowledgement Program. Carnell Smith calls it the Sign a Confession Before You Get Proof Program, because they're going to hand him the baby D and Roxy. They're going to tell him how much that baby. Ooh, look, got your eyes. Ooh,
Look
got that.
like you.
Look, got their cheeks like yours. Oh, yeah. Hold on a second. Hold on. Let me pull out this 18-year authorization instrument. Yeah, you all right. You see this right here? This is an 18-year authorization instrument in the hand of a teenage boy under 18. He could sign himself up for 18 to life. And any man, including married men, can sign up. And by the way, the story you're being told at that moment, yeah, there's a reason that baby looks like you. The child's mother has a type of guy that she likes. And there's 3 dudes who look like you, and the baby looked like all 4 of you. So the lookalike test is a highly inaccurate method for picking paternity. So Lord behold, I know I might seem a little comical, but see, I had to be able to get information across to the legislators so they wouldn't fight it and make them think about it and do what Dr. Martin Luther King used to say. He says, help a person walk a mile in your shoes so they can see and feel what it's like. Because, when he was lobbying for civil rights reform, it wasn't so much that he himself was a victim of a lot of those atrocities. He had the platform, he had the mic, and he had the stage presence to be able to speak for all the people who couldn't speak. You with me?
Right.
That is why I'm doing what I'm doing now. Yeah, I got out. I could just walked away. But you know what? Losing $330,000+ of my money that I could have paid for my kids' college. I could have paid off my college. I could have paid off, man, with that money invested. Look, with that money invested, I could have retired 15 years ago.
Absolutely. Had you invested that in some Amazon stock?
And look, and don't get me started in some crypto. Come on now. Look, and by the way, I was securities licensed. I was selling mutual funds. So believe me, I had money invested. I pulled money out of accounts to pay for this dadgum legal fight. So some lessons have been learned out of this. Don't sign. So before we just go further, your audience has to know there's 4 major ways that men and boys get caught in this trap.
What are the 4 ways?
Number 1, signing that paternity acknowledgement. My firm rule, under no circumstances do you sign a document that admit you did something till you have proof in your hand by a legal DNA test that you actually caused that pregnancy. And I don't care how much they try to shame you, they try to insult you, try to guilt trip you, and this obsessive need to be right. And they were like, "Who hurt you?" And what yo? And by the way, some of the guys have been duped by their own mothers,
Absolutely.
saying, "Oh, look, the baby look like us." And guess what?
Girl code.
And mom won't even put up the money to get him out of jail later, because once he signed that document, they have full authorization to come after him for money. Number 2, the marital presumption of paternity. Automatically, if your wife has children while you are still married to her, they are automatically assumed and presumed to be yours. Even if you are deployed in Afghanistan, Russia, Ukraine, whatever the current day battle is for today. Or how about this? You're legally separated and you are in a high income job in Alaska and she balling like she hit the lotto in Florida. You have no access, but because she's still tied to you legally, you are automatically assumed to be that child's father. So married men, once she leaves your house, you got to take active steps to get the divorce, get her out of your name immediately. Period.
Right.
And again, do not fall for the shame, the insults, guilt trip, and the need to be right. But I'm your wife. Look at my YouTube channel. You see there's mostly married men who are paternity fraud victims. Listen,
Exactly.
it is more profitable to do it to a married man because you get no fault divorce. You get to sticking with child support, alimony, take the house, and make him pay for your attorney fees.
Right.
Wait.
And move the new man in while he's paying for the bills.
And you can't even come over to the house.
Absolutely. You're right. And you know what? You made a statement about the whole, oh, the baby looks like you. And there may be some situations where the baby actually does. But there are situations where women are pregnant by their husband's brothers or their boyfriend's brothers. So even if the baby looks like you, it doesn't necessarily mean that that baby belongs to you.
Yes, because your cousin looks like you.
Right.
Your
right.
daddy looks like you.
And those stories exist too. Those stories exist
So
too.
look, so the man and the kid are actually brother and sister because she got pregnant with his daddy. Nah, that means his dad is a low down piece of something. All right. But she knew she was married at all times.
Right.
So if she wasn't attacked, that's something she was a willing and knowing participant in. And I say she should step up to the plate and get the full equality treatment.
Absolutely.
Cause that's fair. That's equal. You know, right on the top of the United States Supreme Court, it says equal justice under law. And
That's
I say
just
to
a pretty package.
and I say to the radical feminists, you should get the whole dose. You shouldn't get a partial. You should get the whole thing. Number 3, ready for this one? Incorrect default judgment. Right now, as I hold up this 18 to life authorization instrument, I'm holding up a pen for the people that's like, what the heck is he holding up? A pen. If I put this pen in the hand of a family court judge or an appointed family court child support hearing officer, this is all we need to make you the daddy of a child you ain't never seen before, from a woman you have never touched, that you don't even know, because she's not required to send in any proof when she files this lawsuit. So here's how it goes. If for whatever reason you don't make it to the court hearing on the day they are having the hearing about your case, you can lose by default. And now, yes, it is possible that a guy who really is the dad is just trying to skip out. And in those cases, a default judgment would be appropriate until you get the test to confirm later whether or not it was true. All right. I'll concede that point. But now, when we have documented proof that in California, roughly 80% of the paternities established were done by default judgment, And one of my affiliate groups in California was the Veterans Against Paternity Fraud, with 600 military men from Army, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, officer, non-officer alike. And these men had DNA proof they weren't the daddy. Come on, people. Don't tell me that, well, because he didn't make it to Your Honor, the man was deployed out of the country. What, you idiot? How is he going to tell his commanding officer, look, Sarge, I can't go out with the troops today. I'm not doing patrol duty tonight. Do you know what that sounds like? Can you say he'll be locked up in the brig?
Right.
You don't talk smack back to your commander. But listen, if he doesn't show up at the hearing, he will be made to be the daddy at the stroke of a pen, and then says, well, you weren't here to challenge the ruling. And this is an area where ignorance is used against men and boys alike. Because when you don't know what your rights are, you don't know the law, you don't speak the language of the court and the rules of the court, and you don't know the rules of evidence, how could you aggressively defend yourself walking in thinking all you got to do is hold your hand up and say, excuse me, Your Honor, so let me tell you what had happened? That ain't how that works. More than one client over the years have told me, Mr. Smith, I went in there and they wouldn't even let me talk. I said, that's because you didn't do it right, brother, sister, or in this case, some cases, the mother of the teenage boy. And they're like, well, how can they do that? It's legal to trap your son, husband, boyfriend, fiance, just on the mother's word. And then the judge, with their eloquent, fine words, and they use Latin and says, this situation has latches and estoppel. And by the way, sir, was it ignorancia de excusa, which means ignorance of the law is no excuse. It ain't our fault. So you thought it was our job to help you? Let me teach you something here. You should have been in court, but Your Honor, I didn't get the notice. Sure, buddy. Yeah, the dog ate it. Mm-hmm. And we got proof. Listen, we got proof on YouTube right now. Look up the story of Carnell Alexander. This guy.
I know that story.
I know. Listen, I know him.
Go ahead.
And this guy, the woman has admitted she lied. Mm-hmm. She said, they told me I couldn't get my EBT and my welfare benefits unless I put somebody's name down. And she knew Mr. Alexander's name and she put him down. And then the process server lied and said they served him at his father's house. Now, the reason we know that was a lie is he was locked up in jail at the time. He was one of the easiest people to find if you were trying to find somebody to serve a lawsuit on. He was easier to find than coming to my house. Because usually the distance between the courthouse and the jailhouse is much shorter. You hear what I'm saying? But Mr. Carnell Alexander didn't find out there was an incorrect default judgment against him till he got stopped in a traffic incident some years after he got out of jail, got his life together, working in construction. And the cop ran his ID and says, there's a warrant for your outstanding child support. He's like, I don't have a kid. He's like, oh, yes, you do. And took him into custody. And guess what? Just like that, they violated, according to the 14th Amendment, I think even 5th Amendment, you have the rights by due process to know of a lawsuit against you, and any judgments rendered on the basis of violating your rights should be vacated and overturned.
Due process. 14th
okay.
Due process.
So think about that for a second. The child's mother lied, and we got her on television camera admitting she lied. The process server, they didn't even find the process server. The process server signed a sworn affidavit that they attempted to deliver and serve Mr. Alexander at his father's house when he was physically somewhere else in county custody. He could not have served him. Now, think about that. Since everybody took and operated on the child's mother's word alone, there's something wrong with this system. How you going to blame the men and the boys because they don't know how this works, and we don't teach how this works in middle school. We don't teach it in high school. You don't teach it in college. And guess what? Unless you actually take the path of a family law attorney, you could be a lawyer and get caught up in paternity fraud. Because I had a criminal defense attorney come testify. He didn't find out that all of the children from his first marriage were not his until his second marriage. The wife couldn't get pregnant. He was sterile and didn't know it. And that might be traceable back to his time serving in the military.
Wow.
That's crazy.
So one of the reasons you can hear as a spokesman, I know all the stories because I've been conversant with the victims in multiple states. I've traveled to multiple states. I've spoken to multiple legislative bodies. And by me personally being involved in writing the law, guess what? I know a whole lot about it. It's not a brag or a boast. But if you want to become an advocate so that your state joins my state and those that have a remedy in place right now, you could either go learn how to do it from scratch, or I could save you a lot of time as your coach. So yeah, I'm holding up a flag here, but I wrote the book Trapped by Law so that we might inspire some more advocates. And by women and others knowing this story, they can warn their family and friends that this trap exists.
And that's exactly why I wanted to bring you on today. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the book. So like you stated, there are tons of these stories out here. You know, multiple men have gone through or been a victim of paternity fraud. I know women who have purposely, victimized men in paternity fraud. Mm-hmm. But what inspired you to write the book? Because like I said, multiple men have the story. What made you write the book?
Great question, Dee. So, before I wrote the book, I had people contacting me and they wanted me to come to their state and help them change the law. And after about 11 states, I've been to Wisconsin, I've been to California several times, I've been to Michigan, Florida. I helped Texas, North Carolina, Delaware, Connecticut. Heck, I have to look at the list. But I traveled to all those states out of my own pocket. And after I lost my case, one of the things that really ticked me off and when I wrapped up my case is the judge refused to sign the order setting me free unless I waived the right to sue my ex-girlfriend. And you want to talk about a guy was hot?
So you meaning you couldn't be refunded for all the money that was spent in child support and attorney fees?
I was suing for everything. Attorney's fees, loss of use of the money, child support, and damages. Because guess what? Had I not paid child support for 11 years, they would have stuck me with an 11-year bill with interest.
Right.
And since I believe in equality, we were going to flip that baby right back around. And I was going to help her with a definite collection. I was going to put a lien on her house, and I was going to use the full powers of collection to help her pay it. I wasn't going to put her family in the street like they did me.
Oh,
I was going to be fair.
Quick question, Mr. Smith.
Yeah, Roxy.
A lot of times we have people who do like you did before. They do in good faith. A lot of the men, and they will start to make their payments for their child support before there's actually a judgment for child support, right? But in a lot of states, they consider that income to be gifts. So I know here in Ohio, if you pay out of your pocket, it doesn't matter if you had a receipt. It doesn't matter 10 years from now, if they go down to the courthouse and they say, you owe me child support, you owe that child support from that 10 years back, regardless to whether you were paying it up front or not, because they don't consider that money that you paid out before to be child support payments. They consider it as a gift. So is that something that you had to face as well?
So great question, Roxy. So the answer to your question is it depends. See, I was able to get all of mine counted as child support because I did something that every man and boy should do. Number one, under no circumstances do you ever pay the mother cash. I don't care how much she begs, pleads, cries, has a fit and spins on the floor. You let her do all that craziness and say, and then when you get up, I have a U.S. postal money order, or I have a check, and on the check states explicitly what this is for, and it says child support for named child. It has to have child support and the name of the child on that instrument that you're using. And if I ever paid cash, I had my receipt book with me. And until she signed that receipt book, the money in this hand did not get over to the hand to get to her. And I had proof of all of my payments.
So with you saying that with the younger generation, we're all electronic now. So that means if you cash app somebody, there's a place on there where it's asking you, what is the reason?
Yes.
In that space,
yes,
for child support for
yes,
named child. So if you do want to use technology, the same rules apply.
Yes. But now, considering how much you'll have to go through hoops to fight to get your money back, here is the success tip from Carnell Smith. You said, I see that you're pregnant. All right. Congratulations. Now, does that mean that's my baby? I don't know. And in the words of former President Reagan, we trust but verify. I hear what you're saying. I see the baby. Yep. You have a baby. Yep. I agree with you. Now, so what we're going to do now is we're going to do like the courts do. The courts have this little technique where they can deposit money into the registry of the court, and it will remain in the registry of the court until the decision has been made that this issue is addressed in your favor. Now, let me translate this to Barney style, or whatever the current day little Kitty's character is. All right. In the current day, whether you use Venmo, Cash App, Zelle, any of the electronic methods, PayPal, etc., I say you put your money into an account that you control, and you make regular payments of this money in here, and you provide her with a receipt showing this money in here. And these funds will not be released until we have confirmation by legal DNA test that this is a pregnancy that I am actually responsible for causing. If you are alleging or accusing or presuming that I am the biological father. Now, if a guy has signed up for assisted pregnancy with the woman, and we know that they're not using his sperm, and he signed the agreement to that treatment, then that guy's not a paternity fraud victim. He has no reason to delay making the payments. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean that she couldn't have still done some little slickery and got pregnant with Chad, Pookie, Ray, and Road Dogg on the side there, and is Road Dogg's baby, and you signed that agreement, and she got hers naturally and skipped the sperm bank altogether. There's so many little ways that you can get duped that I say, trust what they said, but verify everything. And you gotta be almost like Mr. Palmer says, you gotta have almost ice water in your blood, man. They will cry. They're gonna pitch a fit. I told him, I said, hey, some people may not agree with your message, Mr. Palmer, and the way you present the message. They need you just like they need me. Regardless of the delivery, we need to make sure that the information gets out and we raise the public awareness of what's going on and how many of those with this modern day woman mindset and philosophy that they want to use the law as supremacy to take advantage of men and boys so they can just have their way because they said so. So right. Don't take their word. Everything is required with confirmation. You deposit this money into an account, and what you deposit, you don't touch. And I'm going to suggest to you that you don't put it in the account at your main bank. This is where I would go to a secondary bank and open up an account no cost savings account or a no cost checking account. And I would put that money in there regularly. So when I get to the court, I can show that I have been putting aside this money. And Your Honor, the only reason we hadn't got this test done is because she won't do it. And Your Honor, I will support any child that we can prove is mine. But Your Honor, I'm not releasing $1 till I get proof that child is mine. So how soon can you get this order for the test?
Right. So I guess we can talk about this now. But before we actually talk about this, I do want to talk about, so in your book, you mentioned a paternity notification affidavit. What
The PNA.
Yes. What is a PNA?
All right, great question. So I love the fact that you and Roxy have read the book, man. You ladies are on the ball as hosts. So the PNA is part of a strategy that I came up with of why, something that men and boys would need to know, so they won't be able to have this loophole later where she says, "Well, I believed in my heart that he was the father." Because what is often asked is a softball question. Do you believe this is your child's father? That is a low ball question. Let's ask the real question. During your baby's window of conception, 30 days before and 30 days after, is this the only person you had intimate relations or sex with? That is a closed-in question. That is not an open question. That question has two possibilities. Now,
yes or no?
If you the kind that go out there and party and get drunk, high, and out your mind, and you did things in such a way that you couldn't legally consent to what happened at the party, you have some other problems. But that furthers the need for men and boys to get the testing done, as opposed to relying on verbal assurances and, people thinking because they got their fingers crossed behind their back that they're exempt from lying. I'm like, listen, guys, some of these folks will make a mistake on picking you because they were with so many people during that window of conception. So the paternity notification affidavit gives you a document that will be sworn under oath, signed in front of a notary, and she will need to provide this paternity notification affidavit to everybody she had intimate relations with during this window of conception. And she doesn't provide the names of all of the people to each of the guys, but all of the guys will be aware that there's 1, 2, 3, or 4 other people that could be the child's father. And this is why you should not sign a paternity confession saying you did it. Because the truth is, right now, I don't care how much you believe this is your cupcake dream girl, sweetheart. Since I know 5 pastors who are paternity fraud victims, and the first lady of the church pulled paternity fraud on those 5 pastors, nobody is 100% safe except the person who was on a deserted island with the child's mother for 60 days before she got pregnant. Everybody else, you need to take the test.
Right. So that would allow for, I guess, you to address issues regarding perjury.
Absolutely. Look, and I forgot. I believed in my heart, because listen, in every case, including paternity cases that I've done in my old DNA testing office, because I did actually provide DNA testing services, all of them for paternity, immigration, and maternity services for over 10 years. So I know this business. Okay. I know how this works. There are multiple ways you can get this answer to the question. All right. But I always ask the mothers in my office, using my ABCs, my formula for ABCs, I says, what is your baby's birth date? Check. Now for guys, that is the only reliable date that you can count on, because it's on the birth certificate. There were independent witnesses who saw when that baby dropped out of the chute before they got cleaned up and scrubbed up, and they know what time, and they know whether it was a single birth or multiple birth. They'll have all of that information, and you can trust that date. But you need 2 more dates. you need to know, or date related information. ABCs of paternity means A, age at birth. How many weeks old was that baby when they dropped out the chute?
And what does that mean exactly?
I'm
Please explain that.
going to explain. So for a lot of men, boys, and women, they think a full-term pregnancy is 9 months. And everybody who believes this is going to be off by 4 weeks. A full-term pregnancy is 40 weeks / 280 days. If you think it's 9 months, let's see, average month has 4 weeks. 4 times 9 is 36. If you think it's 36 and it's actually 40 or 42, then everybody who was in the window of conception, who was having fun with her, is in the realm of possibility of being a child's father. The only people who can accurately tell you how old that baby was at birth is going to be the medical professionals, not the baby mother. And if it was a high risk pregnancy, she's going to have a lot of data from being monitored throughout her pregnancy by her OBG and that support team. They're going to have sonograms and all kind of things where they've done measurements on the baby. They've charted the baby's progress. And by the time that baby's delivered, they're going to usually be accurate to within 2 weeks of the actual delivery. There's times though you'll get an initial estimate based on the mother's menstruation cycle. But let's be honest here. There are a lot of times a woman gets pregnant and she don't know she's pregnant.
True.
She went back and had one more round with the fella she just broke up with. She gets into a relationship with guy number 2. Guy number 2 thinks the baby's his. She gets DNA testing done, and the baby is actually guy number 1 who she broke up with. So, age at birth. How many weeks was that baby at birth? Number 2, birth date. The only truly reliable piece of information that you can get that doesn't come from the child's mother. Now, if you're relying on age at birth from the child's mother, she can pick a number out the sky and tell you anything she wants to while she got her fingers crossed behind her back. Number 3, C, conception date. There ain't a guy on the planet except that guy who was with her on a deserted island. Everybody else, you taking it on faith. Because she'll tell you what conception date she wants you to believe, so that just like with a lot of the military men, when I was a DJ at the non-commissioned officers club at the Army back at Fort Gilliam in Atlanta, I could always tell when the guys got deployed. A new group of women would show up in the club. And a lot of those women in that new group in the club were the married women and the girlfriends of the guys who just got deployed. Mm-hmm. And the guys who she was going home with was not her husband or her boyfriend who just got deployed. And guess what? When those guys get back, those women start adjusting the conception date to line up with, to make the story believable that you finna be a daddy. And guess what? And if he believes her, it can and will be used against him. So ABCs of paternity: age of birth, birth date, conception date. Using that formula is how I solved a case involving a man who I told him under his situation that the only other possible father must be a man who has your same DNA profile. So his girlfriend heard me on the radio when I was doing a feature about paternity fraud. I was live in the studio and they were taking calls. And she says, my boyfriend needs your help. I said, well, tell you what. I gave her where my office was. And the guy came over to my office. And would you believe he worked in the same office park where I had my office? So the guy comes over and he says, they got a DNA test that says 99.995 that I'm the father of this baby. He's like, man, this is my ex. I hadn't touched this chick since I broke up with her. And then I left and went to the Army. And I said, well, that is I saw the DNA report. I knew the lab. I said, well, there's no problem with the report and the lab. So these samples that were done showed that you're 99.9995 related to this child. It's something like 1 out of like 2-3 million.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him, I said, well, the only way that a profile this accurate with a paternity establishment that high is the other guy would literally have to be an identical DNA match to you. I said, would you happen to have a twin brother or a triplet? He's like, yeah, I got a twin brother.
Wow.
I was like, I know how to solve this. And based on my formula on the ABCs of paternity, we plotted it out, just like you saw that table in my book.
Mm-hmm.
We put that together. And I said, let me show you something. I said, you would have never thought to do this, but this is why you hire a consultant. This is why you have somebody tag team with your lawyer. I said, we can get you out of this. All right. I said, but we need one more piece of evidence. With that formula, we were able to prove that my client was not in the United States at that time.
Wow.
He was in combat duty in Afghanistan as a sergeant in the U.S. Army. and you, since you're military, you know what a DDS 214 is.
Yes, I know for a fact those stories exist. I know some of those women whose husbands were deployed and they ended up pregnant during his deployment. So I know those stories exist.
So,
but he was the husband, so he's dad by default.
Marital presumption.
Right.
So, but in this case, this guy wasn't married. But in my state, the marital presumption has been overturned anyway, and we got a paternity fraud law. One way or the other, we were going to get my guy out. I told him, I says, I says, were you honorably discharged? Okay. All right. Even if you were dishonorably, we still got an official discharge record, and you got your duty, your duty service record to be able to show where you were during this window of conception. I said, well, we got all that documentation together. He went and got certified copies. We got him an attorney, provided that, went to court, and the judge took our recommendation and ordered a DNA test with his brother, his married brother, not married to the child's mother, who didn't want to step up to the plate because this was going to cause some conflict at his house. Well, the brother came back at 99.9995% too. Guess who is that baby's daddy? Cause based on the window of conception, he's the only one that was in the continent of the United States. Look.
Wow.
Within 30 miles of the child's mother.
Okay, let me ask you a question. So without that formula, what would have been the potential damage to both of those men with them having the same test results?
Some judges would order and make both men pay child support and split the bill, because the court wouldn't have been able to figure out which guy it was. And initially, they were just going to stick the bill just to my guy, the sergeant, former sergeant, and make him pay it. And he's like, man, this ain't right. This not fair, man. I was not here. I said, well, what you say and what you can prove are two different stories. But guess what? When we documented all of those things with my formula and all that information, made a admissible display with the dates and the range, and then look, showed a map of where our guy was more than 4,000 miles away, Your Honor. I know with telephone calls, you can reach out and touch somebody. and with a Skype call or the Zoom call, all that. I said, but Your Honor, our guy had no possibility, and he didn't send nothing in the mail to her either.
Yeah, I don't think you can impregnate anybody via Skype. I don't think they figured that one out yet.
I was like, Your Honor, she's 100% safe on Skype calls and any other multimedia video audio calls. So that only leaves one possibility. And by the way, the judge agreed with us, because guess what? He didn't show up with just his word because he was losing. You hear me? Before he got me involved, he was losing, and he was looking at 18 to life. You know, when I say that, that's 18 years of child support payments. And if for any reason that child gets emotionally, physically disabled and unable to care for themselves as a functioning adult, you will pay for lifetime, gentlemen.
Hey, I always say that child support is the 18 to 23 year STD they don't tell you about.
Yeah.
They don't tell you, but it's a sexually transmitted disease. I'm telling you. It's
Well,
something they don't
actually,
talk about.
you know what? It needs a slight tweak, D, because in the case of paternity fraud, he didn't even have the sex with her that led to the pregnancy.
You're right. You're absolutely right. So while we're talking about that, so we're talking about how important it is to have DNA testing and how easy it is for anybody to be caught in a situation where you could be a victim of paternity fraud. One of the things that bothers me, I guess, and I guess brings a lot of resistance is that I think people have a hard time with the idea that my mother may have lied to me or my wife may have lied to me. I don't think men or children want to believe that they could potentially be a victim of that situation too. And one of the things that's important for me is for people to understand that fraud doesn't have to be the only reason why you question paternity.
Nope.
And I told this story when we were on Gail's show. For me, I was born in a segregated hospital. At the time, Black babies were not put with the white babies. So, and when I was born, I just happened to look like a white baby. I was very fair skinned. I had freckles, gray eyes, red hair. So there was a mix up of me in the hallway, and I ended up being put on the other end of the hospital. That right there in and of itself was a reason enough for me to question paternity, because you never know. There are stories out there that exist where mothers go home with the wrong baby.
Yes.
Babies are kidnapped from hospitals.
Yes.
There are a ton of stories out now on Netflix.
Yes.
I watched one called Our Father, where it's the story of a doctor who was a gynecologist and a fertility doctor. And they found up to 90 siblings through ancestry type DNA testing. This man was literally running around impregnating the entire town. And there were situations where there were husbands and wives that were actually going down there. The husband was actually donating his sperm for the procedure, but the doctor was inseminating his sperm into the wife. So these couples had no reason to suspect or believe that they would be a victim of paternity fraud, that this was not our biological child. So there are so many reasons why people need to question DNA. And it got me to thinking that with states now introducing all of these, what I call clump of sale support bills, y'all probably know them as unborn child support. The reason why I call them clump of sales is because when you were holding on to a federally protected row, it was just a clump of sales. Now all of a sudden we need child support for it.
Yep.
So, but with states introducing those bills, there are going to be more and more situations where people can become victim of paternity fraud. And if they're not going to mandate paternity testing at birth, we have got to take it upon ourselves to take that power back. Know for sure, even if you don't feel like you deserve to know, our children deserve to know the truth, if for nothing else, for medical reasons alone. So it got me to thinking, and I was talking to the Mr. Palmers of the world, Gail at Night, and we kind of talked about the idea of starting this movement of having a national DNA test day. And so I came up with a date of 8/26. So when you see the hashtag DNA 826, that's what that means.
Yeah.
The reason why that date was chosen was because August 26th is National Women's Equality Day. It was the day that women actually got to right to vote, and they were considered equal to men. So
go girl, go.
Since we're talking about the whole idea of where we are in family courts and the unjust, the biases that we experience in family court, what men go through, especially with paternity fraud, we wanted to express the importance of getting DNA tested. Everyone needs to go get tested, regardless of whether you speculate there is fraud. If you have never been tested, go get tested, because stories exist. So, but 8/26 was chosen because, again, National Women's Equality Day. And what better way to start the equality conversation in family court than to rid ourselves of the mama's baby, daddy's maybe mantra? So let's go ahead and find out for sure. And I was so happy that when I spoke to you about it, you were like, yes, I love that idea. And so we kind of wanted to talk about the idea of starting a movement. And because you went to the Supreme Court, you actually got a bill passed. So if people want to become advocates for things like that, they want to start those movements, they want to get engaged, they want to get in legislation, what are some steps that they can take to try to sort of push those movements forward? And what is your take on the National DNA Test Day?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. That was a lot. So let me break it up in chunks. Let me start with first. Great idea. Phenomenal idea to link the movement to do DNA tests to Women's Equality Day. Because with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, I think there are going to be multiple states aside from Georgia who are going to make an effort to say, well, you know what, we're going to make darn sure the first one who gets this bill is not the state taxpayers. Okay. So by them making say, well, we're going to now attribute child support before the baby's born, I think they're admitting that that is a baby, not a unspecified clump of cells, right? So I support your idea and your motion because it's going to help resolve a lot of family identity questions. And it's going to provide people with peace of mind for a couple of things. How can you do accurate family medical history based on a family tree that has shady leaves and branches on that tree? Why do I say shady? They are not confirmed. They are not verified. And sometimes, whether you like it or not, mom didn't get pregnant with your dad like she thought she did. She might have honestly and with all good intentions believed she got pregnant while she was in that relationship with your dad. However, that last round, that parting ways, midnight train to New Jersey stuff that happened just before they ended that relationship, you got born from that. And all your life, you've been hearing from other family members at the cookout and at the family reunion, man, you sure do look like that dude she used to date. And then it gets so bad that sometimes the other kids ostracize the kid who looks different. You are not our brother. You're not our sister. So to settle all of these things, everybody is really seeking the truth. And I believe everybody deserves the truth. And look, the adult thing to do, the responsible thing to do is stop dancing around the issue, start skirting it, stop trying to tiptoe around Big Mama and Mama's feelings and all that stuff. She a grown-up girl. Look, tell her to suck on her pacifier and let's get this done. Okay.
Pull your big girl panties up and let's
put
go.
Pull them up, put them on. Look, let's deal with it. You either lied or you accidentally made a mistake. It's one of them two possibilities. I leave no room for anything else. Now, we get the testing done. So with 826 saying let's do it based on women's equality, and with the courtesy of the timing of Roe v. Wade, guess what? There is now a legal way that you can get a prenatal DNA test that doesn't endanger the baby. And let me just do it. Hear this now. Hear this. Men, boys, and women who love him. When somebody tries to say he's the father and they want to come after your money before the baby even get born, you want to get the prenatal legal DNA test. And all it requires after 7th, 8th week during pregnancy, they get a blood sample from the mother, and it will be independently collected by a phlebotomist or MD, and a buccal swab sample from the guy. So Credible Lab will do 2 cheek cells collections on the guy's mouth to make sure what we're collecting are called epithelial cells or cheek cells. And as long as you're alive, you produce millions of these every day. And what they're going to do is extract the DNA out of those cheek cells from the guy. They're going to extract the fetal cells out of the mother's blood, and they're going to, I think is it the red blood or the white cells, one of those two that actually contains the DNA for the mother too. And with that blood sample, they're going to be able to get a genetic profile for the mother, for the baby, and with the cheek cell sample from the guy. And the first thing they do is match the baby's DNA up with the mother. You get half of your DNA from your biological mother, and you get the other half from your biological father. So by matching up the mother with the child first, the only remaining DNA that's left can only come from the biological father. If 3 or more of those DNA markers do not match that man cannot be the biological father.
So what about the safety risk?
There is no safety risk with this particular type of legal prenatal test. I only know of my former business partner, DNA Diagnostics. That's the lab who provide the test for Maury Show, for all of the judge shows, a lot of the shows in the UK and other shows. And also those are the services that I was marketing. Okay. And they bought the previous lab that I had been marketing for. Okay. So Identigene is now owned by DNA Diagnostics. So before this, the only way you could get the test done was called an invasive procedure, where they would stick a long amniocentesis needle to draw amniotic fluid out of the mother's sac while she's carrying the baby. And one of the reasons I didn't offer that service was because there's a possibility this could trigger an abortion and the mother could lose the baby.
Wow.
So I refused to offer that service, even though there are places, some of my competition would offer it. I just wouldn't do it. Okay. So right now, 2022, I went and looked up one of their news announcements, but they've had it for some years now. But considering that this Roe v. Wade thing has been overturned, and the state of Georgia and other states have already passed laws where they want to get a child support order now based on her word alone. She said you did it. That's enough. If you are crazy and you sign a document admitting to it, number one, don't sign nothing till you get legal test results in your hand. And now with the advent of a prenatal, non-invasive, legal DNA test. And by the way, it's going to cost you more than the DNA test that's done after, that's usually done after a baby is born. Okay. But by it being non-invasive, it doesn't cause a risk for the baby to be aborted and mother lose the baby, causing infection. It's no different than a mother who is having her pregnancy monitored and they're checking for her iron levels, make sure she's not anemic, and monitor a whole lot of other things where they're doing regular blood draw samples with her through the pregnancy. You can tell by what I'm saying. I'm not just your shade tree guy here. I know some stuff here. Okay. Been doing this for decades. This is why you might need a coach. Come on with me. All right.
Come on with it. So I have a question for you, real quick, because I've seen some of the comments, and they're saying they've been talking about these tests that you can get from CVS and you can get from Walmart and Walgreens and those sort. In your opinion, what would be the difference in getting a test? I know they say we get what we pay for. What would be the difference in getting a test from Walgreens or Walmart versus going to get a DNA test at a local center like DNA Diagnostics or one of the paid centers?
Okay. All right. So that's a great question, Roxy. So what you're asking is, what's the difference between a home paternity test, like what you were seeing on the shelves at CVS, Walgreens, and a lot of the chains for the drugstores, and the legal DNA test? All right. So number one, the home test, it is not admissible for any legal purpose. So it will give you an answer. Let's put it this way. In its basic term, it's going to give you an answer that the samples that were sent in are related or not related. Now, if you send it in, and there's two types. There's what we call a motherless test, where it's the guy and the child. You send those samples in, and since you're testing for paternity, it's going to determine whether or not that half any half of that child's DNA came from this guy. And if 3 or more DNA markers don't match, he didn't do it. Okay. Now, the problem he's going to have, though, if he has already signed a paternity document, a confession saying he did it, they already have all they need to execute a child support order against him. If there's already an existing court order against him, this test result can't be used for proof. Here's why. There is no proof of whose samples you sent in. So if you were the mother and a guy presented you with a test saying that he's not the father and you disagree, I would tell you in a consulting capacity, don't argue with him. Insist upon a legal DNA test and split the cost with the guy. If you have nothing to hide, the difference between these two tests is how the samples are collected and a few other things. With a home test, you do it yourself. There's no proof of identity of whose samples you sent in. For all we know, you swabbed the dog, put the kid's name on it, and sent it in so you could skip making these payments. Or
we are not suggesting anything.
Look, I'm not suggesting, but the reason I'm bringing these things up, I've actually caught women bringing somebody else's kid in for testing because the father was about to win custody.
Wow.
And so, there's various ways we do things to catch people trying to commit fraud. And they're trying to commit fraud on the court. They're trying to commit fraud to prevent losing custody, because if she loses custody, she's going to lose that child support payment and she is going to have to pay child support. So I've seen women bring somebody else's kid in trying to say, well, he's not the father. And it's like, hold on, wait a minute. So, dummy, this is going to work against you on a whole lot of ways. All right. Now, back to what's the difference with the legal test, though. With a legal test, your samples will not be collected by you. It is absolutely required that your samples be collected by a neutral third party who has no interest in the outcome, which means if your cousin happened to be working at one of the collection centers, your cousin can't touch them samples, can't be involved with the collection of your case because it will no longer be impartial. Got that? And you have to show proof of identification. All of the adults, when they come in for testing, you got to bring a current government issued photo ID. That's right, dadgummit. If you can bring a photo ID down to cash your check, you could bring photo ID in to get your dadgum legal DNA test. And we going to photograph you that day. Mm-hmm. And we going to fingerprint you that day. And whether it's a kid or a newborn, we fingerprint them too. Come on, people. Like, look, wait a minute. You fingerprint a newborn baby? You know they fingerprint the heels of the babies in the hospital before they check out, right? Well, if the hospital can do a heel print, guess who else can do a heel print? Your sample collector for the DNA office. So these tests are done after birth, right? So the babies are present or child is present. So the home test, you get an answer, but you can't do nothing with it legally. The only time I would say somebody is safe to use that home test, there is no court order already. You did not sign any documents admitting that you're the father, and you're married, and you're not in a state that has marital presumption. Now, once you get those results and you did everything honestly and correct, you now know the answer, right? And if that says so-and-so who was tested is excluded as the biological father of the child and the probability of paternity is 0%, you didn't do it. But now, if she pushes the issue now and tries to sue you anyway for child support, you're going to still end up having to go get a legal test now. So if there's a challenge against your test, that in most cases going to end up being another test anyway, I say it's more economical to just get the dadgum legal test in the beginning if it's going to have any potential for a legal matter. What if you are the dad and you're trying to get joint custody or get yourself established as the father of the child so you can have an active parenting relationship with the kid. You got to prove you're the dad. Well, you're establishing that you actually caused the pregnancy goes in your favor. And then I tell you, go ahead, sign yourself up, take parenting classes, learn all the ways of how you can communicate effectively with your child and how to not drag your child into the adult matters, and don't discuss payments and issues you have with the mother, with the child, and how mom needs to do the same dadgum thing. See, there's a lot to this situation. You kind of getting that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now with the advent of a non-invasive, legal prenatal test, we don't have to wait till little Junebug gets born. After the 8th week, oh yeah, after the 8th week, we can get you a legal answer. And yes, Little Miss Cupcake, she's going to have to bring her photo ID. If she lost her license, she better stop by and get her a state issued ID like she would use for voting. Hey, or cashing a check. Whatever she used to get money, she can use that to show proof of who she is. And she got to show up with the baby's birth certificate. Okay. And you, sir, you got to have your ID. So whether you're a teenage boy, hey, your school ID, you got a state issued ID, you got your learner's permit driver's license. It's going to work in everybody's favor that you get the facts and not try to be swayed by feelings and insults and sign language. Don't let them shame you just cause you want proof and verification. Like said, Mr. Palmer says, man, you got to have ice. You got to get ice in your veins.
Keep the veins cold. And I'm so glad you brought that up and shared that information about the prenatal DNA test, because the best part about that and having the ability to perform that at 8 weeks is most women find out they're pregnant around 6 to 8 weeks. So the moment she says, I'm pregnant, let's go get a test.
What you saying?
You don't have to worry about.
Say that again. It's time for the test.
Perfect timing. Perfect timing. So typically by the time she tells you, most women don't know until they're about 6 to 8 weeks pregnant. So that is perfect timing. Do not hesitate. But for the ones who are not dealing with somebody who's currently pregnant or haven't had that news delivered to you yet, again, if you have never received proof that your mother is your mother or your father is your father, but especially your father, because 9 times out of 10, mama probably went home with the right baby. 9 times out of 10. But those.
Well, I'm going to say maybe closer to 8.
Oh, you know what? I'll give you that. I will give you that.
Because of baby swapping and people stealing kids at the hospital. There are a whole lot of biometrics and other high security methods that are applied in the nursery wing in hospitals today, is because of people who literally went shopping at the hospital. I know of a case where a lady, she went in the lady's house and took her cousin's baby and then set the house on fire. And then sat around there and tried to claim that the woman's baby died in the fire, her own cousin. A few years later, the woman meets the cousin with a kid at a birthday party for her cousin's kid now. And this kid has the same birthmark that her baby had. And she just can't let it go. She's like, this don't seem something about that kid. That kid got the same birthmark as mine. The mother gets a hair sample that has the hair follicle intact. See, you didn't know about that part. If you get a hair sample and it has the hair follicle, the little white thing, the bulb at the bottom of the hair, and that's intact, the mom paid a little extra to get that done. And guess what that test revealed, Roxy and Dee?
I already know what the answer is.
Her baby.
That the cousin's baby was her baby. And right then, this is the way Carnell Smith would end the story. Her cousin gets introduced to handcuffs that fit her perfectly for kidnapping, for arson.
Right.
And now we got to reacclimate the child with her actual, because the kid thought this other woman was just her cousin.
Mm-hmm.
This woman was her actual biological mother, and the child had been kidnapped. But guess what? In these baby swapping stories, including this year, families have found out, usually because of paternity tests, the guy gets a test, turns out the kid's not his. The mother swears she never been unfaithful. She is so adamant that she demands a test, and they test for maternity. Turns out the kid's not related to the mother. The kid's not related to the father either. So now we going back to, where did y'all pick that baby up? Now we go back to the day that all of these babies were checked out at the hospital, and guess what? Their biological child was across town with another family. And in almost every case that I have found when it involves baby swapping, biology matters when a mom leaves the hospital with the wrong babies.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
the kids get reunited, because biological truth matters when it comes to women.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it's the fact. And hospitals get sued, and it causes some heartache. But guess what? The truth was never the problem. It was that first paternity test that unfolded this whole thing and unearthed there was a baby swapping problem. So here's why 826 and also DNA testing at birth makes sense. If we did DNA testing during the first week of the baby's birth, where the father is available, and if he's not available, we get the mother and the child sample collected and on file at the lab. Okay. Because once she identifies the paternity candidates, because I don't like to say who's the father, candidates means these potential. If we have to find him because he's currently deployed, well, guess what? He ain't going to be able to come here next week and be at the hospital. We can't guarantee that.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how well intentioned, no matter how much you want that to happen. And especially if it's his ex. Come on, man. Ex? Oh, no, I need to stay and make my money. I'll get to you when I take my leave. Okay. All right. But if we did DNA testing at birth, we would guarantee the names on that baby's birth certificate belong to the biological mother and to the biological father for every case it's possible to get those samples done. Now, for those cases where it's an adoption, well, that man knows up front he's not related to the baby. That's not a problem for him, right? And the woman who's adopting a kid that's not biologically related to her, it's not a problem for her. So birth certificates should be modified, in my humble opinion, to have a A and a B designation. The A would mean adopted. So you as a kid, adoptees right now still want to find out who are their family members, so that one day don't end up dating a family member or marrying them and having a baby with them. And C, cause they want to know. And I think they deserve to know, and they should have a right to their heritage, their medical history, their lineage, and the general well-being of knowing who are my people, where am I from. Through Ancestry.com and MyHeritage, I've helped family members in my family find their fathers. I've also identified more than 2,000 relatives in my own family using DNA matching. And I confirmed that my father was my actual biological father. My brother, my younger brother, and I both confirmed that we are DNA verified.
Right. Right.
Now,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, all I'm going to say is, now, if anybody, for years, people told me I look like my dad. They called me Lil Carl, and because my name is Carnell. My father's name was Carl. My mother's name was Nellie. So they truncated the names, and bam, there's me. All right. Now, but it took it to a whole nother level when I had test results, just like I have test results for the daughter I had with my wife. After you've been hoodwinked and fugabooed as a paternity fraud victim, you'll never want to go through this mess again. That's 5 years of my life me trying to save my wife and daughter from becoming homeless, keeping me from going to prison, because the ex insisted and asked them to put me in jail. So knowing what I know today, ask me, would I take that DNA test before I sign anything? You bet I would. Hey, people need to get the word out. 8/26. This needs to become a national ad-on holiday. DNA is the way to get the truth. And we ought to be saying, we want the truth. Gotta have the truth.
And you know what? Somebody brought up a point. So I'm always trying to get women on board, because women struggle with this most, because, you know, we're the ones that's committing the actual fraud. But someone brought up a point about the NBA and the NFL in the chat. And that's another reason why I think women need to be so concerned with DNA, because one day you may have a son. And even though paternity fraud is not a race issue, it can happen to anybody at any moment in time. Has nothing to do with race, religion, family background, ethnicity, none of that matters. But in the melanated community, we tend to have a few dreams for our children, especially when they're being raised by single mothers. There's the sports dream, there's the rapper. So it's this industry environment. So what a lot of people don't realize is, like the NCAA now. So now you have college students, and you have to consider the timing also. Roe was just overturned. It's no longer federally protected. So now that you have college students that are going to be allowed to make money off of their name, image, and likeness, if you think about the data that supported the abortions, a lot of women were having abortions during their college years. So if they currently reside in a state where they no longer will have that ability, or let's say maybe it's just the heartbeat bill and you don't find out until you're at that 6-week mark, now you're going to have more potential for more young men to be victims of paternity fraud, not just necessarily put on child support, but victims of paternity fraud. And you're going to be having college age students, 18, 19-year-old kids, that are going to have sponsorship deals worth millions of dollars potentially. And they could potentially be a victim of paternity fraud. And now we've got to transfer wealth. And let's say this kid, he goes through college, he's gotten these sponsorship, but he never actually gets drafted. Do you know that he's still going to be on the hook for this child, and there's going to be no retroactive reductions on his payment? I don't care if he's no longer making that money, because the Bradley Amendment says that there are no retroactive reductions in child support payments once they have been established. So it is so important for women to also want to be concerned with this moment, because it's not just about your situation. It's about your sons. It's about your brothers. It's about your husbands. It's about your cousins. It's about all those men that you also care about in your life. But most importantly, your sons can be victims. And with college kids being able to make money off their name, image, and likeness, I'm afraid for what paternity fraud is going to look like in the future.
Great observation. So this is why I'm also an advisory member for the Women Against Paternity Fraud. For over the past 2 decades, the number one support base that helps me lobby and get laws changed, and is the number one group of people, roughly 80% of the people who contact me are women. They are trying to help somebody in their life who they think is a paternity fraud victim, or there's a strong possibility, or like one mother who came to me for her 16-year-old son. She said, I just need to know what the facts are before I get attached to this baby. Cause she said that little girl kind of fast. and she was out hanging out with other boys, and you know, the other boy looked like my son too. Remember what I said about women having a type? Well, guess what? The whole thing with the paternity fraud, some of these girls learn this from their mother.
True.
How to use what you got to get what you want. How to fleece a dude. So your son can get caught up in this legal trap as a teenager, even before he makes the draft. The fact that you have scouts paying attention to him, if he's got the talent, they're often paying attention to him as early as freshman, sophomore year in high school. And some of those girls will try to get an anchor baby. Let me say it loud. Anchor baby. Get a baby to hook up to him so that you can stay hooked up to him. So if he does take off, forget the lotto. This is a guaranteed payoff.
Hmm. Absolutely. It's a transfer of wealth.
But listen, I do have a story of a young man. Remember I told you because paternity fraud victims do exist, and there are many of them. There's a young man on my YouTube channel. He said the child support agency contacted him about an ex-girlfriend and told him he had a child. And he said, man, they stressed him out so much, so worried him so bad that he dropped out of college to get a job so he could pay the child support. I, as a grown man, would never tell a boy, under no circumstances do you drop out of college, because you just reduce your income potential, regardless of whether you go pro or not. And guess here's the sad side of that story. At some point later, the young man gets a paternity test, and guess what happened, Roxy? Guess what happened, D?
Not the father.
Not the father.
They wasted a life.
And guess who lost a full ride football scholarship?
Wow.
Because he couldn't take the pressure and he didn't have advice. And which is why even before my daughter got out of college, I had her on a legal plan, and I was teaching her how to use her legal rights, and how that even at after 2 a.m, you have access to an attorney to where you can get legal advice and have a legal defense of prepaid attorney's time, to where if something goes sideways, you got help. Because you can't call. Look, if you get one phone call, you can't call your dad unless your dad is a licensed practicing attorney in the area of law that you need help in. Mm-hmm. If you call me and you need legal help, you need to be calling the membership law firm that I've taught you how to use. Yeah, I did that for my team. Do you understand the power when you start teaching your kids how to use the legal system so they don't get victimized, hoodwinked, fugabooed, and taken advantage of based on ignorance of the law? Because, listen, the law doesn't work according to your feelings. You're not going to walk into a court.
Unless you're a woman in family court.
But even that can be curtailed when you bring your own bulldog to the fight.
Gotcha.
Because I brought me a woman to the fight as my attorney, and guess what? She whooped butt and took names. Because sometimes, for some reason, some of the guys that are attorneys are not willing to go in there aggressively represent the client's interests if he's a guy. But I'm going to tell you something I can say from many of the women who are feisty family law attorneys who will represent men and boys. They know the girl code. And they know that women and girls can do and have lied. And if they've spent any time in practice as a family law attorney, they've seen them lie under oath in court and then try to say, oh, I was mistaken. Like they try to use the Amber Heard lazy defense. But yours truly believes firmly in teaching your teenage boys and your families. Look, I believe that if we teach our kids now how to protect themselves with legal rights, and if you got college age boys and stuff who are going off to school now, you need to teach them about the 4 areas of false accusations, and how if they're going to a party or they're going to a frat party or something, number one, he shouldn't be getting drunk or high.
Absolutely.
Number two, if the girl is drunk or high, under no circumstances do you stay in her company at all. You got to treat her like she got COVID 2000. Okay.
And monkeypox.
And monkeypox together.
Right.
So she got she got the co-monkey flu. You got to treat her just like that. And if she drunk high, she cannot legally give consent to you touching her in no kind of way. And you talking about, well, we were both blitzed. The next thing you'll be singing, I've been locked up, won't let me out. So listen, but when we teach our kids, say, listen, when you do stuff and you are responsible, I want you to be responsible for what you actually did and you need to own up to. But I also want you to have legal protection so that you don't mess around, go and obligate yourself for more than you should, and then don't go in there because you don't know no better. You say something that can and will be used against you, and instead of you getting 90 days, you end up like Brian Banks, the guy who was falsely accused of rape, got 5 years in prison, and the girl lied and she got paid $1.5 million in suing the school system. And then they caught her after we got out of prison on video admitting she lied, but she was scared that she would have to pay the money back.
Wow.
Listen, there's a whole lot to this whole thing about the family law arena. In the family law arena, judges in that area have the most discretion. And in that court, that's where you hear about people getting locked up for 20 years because they refuse to obey the judge's order. And they say they're not locking him up. Look, they're not locking him up because he won't pay the money. They're locking him up because he won't follow the court order. You're like, what kind of stupid rhetoric logic is that? That's like pretzel logic, man. It goes round in circles. It don't make no sense.
Well,
But
they can't say it's about the money. Debtor's prison was outlawed in 1833.
which is why didn't they say you were locked up for contempt because you didn't abide by the court order? Now,
Right.
the fact that you didn't have the money, you had the inability to pay, and the fact that they locked you up for 6 months cost you your job, and now that's on your record. You can't even get your old job back. The judge say, we'll let you out when you come up with the money. This is why you need to know what your rights are. You need to know how to adequately defend yourself. And you can learn how to represent yourself, but most people won't have the temperament and the patience to learn all the stuff necessary to fight for themselves, which then means your only other option then is, how do I get legal counsel so that I have my own legal advocate on my side representing my interests? A good attorney is worth their weight in gold when you understand the difference between a litigator and a negotiator. There's a time you need somebody to come in and fight for you. But if you done already went in there and took a plea deal, yeah, it's going to be like, oh, so-and-so Junebug won't be home for Christmas
Right.
for the next 20 years.
Right.
But listen, you got ladies, thank you so much for doing a fantastic show, covering a tough topic. But for those women out there, look, your baby deserves to know the truth. Your child, son, daughter, they need to know the truth about whose family they really related to.
Right.
And sometimes they get harassed and harangued over stuff that you did. You put them in that situation. You should be trying to help your kid get clear answers. If your son's approaching you, don't be like those women who, like the NFL coach, his mom wouldn't tell him who his daddy was because she cheated on the guy he thought was his dad. And the guy who was actually his dad was married to her best friend. And she said she didn't want to mess up their family. Come on, ladies. Hey, if you're grown enough to do the things, you got to be grown enough to own the responsibility, because it's equal rights. And August 26th is the hallmark of the women's equality. I'm Carnell Smith, and I support this message.
I appreciate the public acknowledgement. Thank you. Yes. 826 DNA 826. Everybody go get tested. So Carnell, tell the people how they can get in touch with you. Matter of fact, I'm about to post your channel in the chat.
Well, guess what? I fixed the link. For thepaternitycoach.com. So rather than people have to try to remember how to get to my Linktree page, because I'm going to be eventually moving stuff up to a website. If you remember thepaternitycoach.com, paternitycoach.com, it will get you to Carnell Smith, the Paternity Coach. You'll get to the website. And if you're a paternity fraud victim and you've experienced this miserable problem, we believe there should be services for mental health, legal, social, financial, and other for people and those families who are affected. There are currently none. There's next to none. Where I can get a lawyer for a mom. Mom can just sign a form. She don't even have to pay the $25 fee to get court representation. So men and boys are suffering. They have mental health from this. They get depressed. They have anxiety over all of this stuff that leads to legal entrapment, and they will suffer for decades. And some marriages have ended because their current relationship thought he cheated on him and he didn't. And he gets the DNA test. his whole life gets flipped up and down based on a lie. This is why Carnell says you can trust what people said. You can trust that there is a baby, but just because they said there's a baby, that don't mean you did it. Don't even mean the baby's hers. So on the paternitycoach.com, you can get access to the book. You can order the book, Trapped by Law, there. And all of my social media is there. My YouTube channel, Twitter, Facebook. Hey, connect with me. Follow me. Send me stories of people. I'm going to be launching my YouTube channel. I'm going to start doing some lives. I got the equipment. We're almost hooked up now. And we're going to take the Naked Truth TV on the podcast. And we're going to see, can we get this message out to help people avoid, A, getting trapped, make them aware that the traps exist. And then 2, how do you get out of them?
Right. So yes, everybody, make sure you subscribe to his channel. Get with him on his site at the Paternity Coach. This guy's got great information, and everybody needs to understand the importance of DNA. We talk about legacy a lot, especially now with the reparations conversations going on. We're trying to generate new wealth and things of that nature. You cannot talk about legacy without discussing lineage. Please go get your DNA test. Mr. Carnell, it has been a pleasure. I am so glad you came on the show to talk about the importance of DNA testing and also tell your story. But just thank you. Much appreciated, sir.
For sure.
Thank you. Like I said, major shout outs to Melanated and Candid Productions. You ladies took a great big step in purchasing the book. I hope you found it informational, educational, easy read. And by the way, it actually got Amazon bestseller in 3 categories, and easy read was one of those categories.
And you know what? It's funny you say that. What did I tell you, Roxy? I literally read this book on a Sunday. I read it on a Sunday. It's a very easy read. All the information you need. It breaks it down to where anybody can understand it. It's not full of legal terminology and things of that nature, but great information to have. Also, I would recommend that anybody contact their local library and ask them for the book. Let the city know what's important to you. So contact your library and ask them if they have that book on the shelf. They're probably going to say no. Make them put it on the shelf.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm gonna circle back to you, ladies, because I think we should do major media on your idea of 826 DNA.
I'm with it.
Because it works in the best interest of kids,
right,
and family to know who they're really related to.
And that's what family court stands for, in the best interest of the child.
And that's all we're doing. We're just making sure that it's based on the truth, right?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. So again, thank you, Mr. Carnell. Of course, anybody have any questions for him, please do not hesitate to reach out to him. It has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
You do the same. All right, Roxy, any last words for you?
No, I mean, that was an amazing show. We learned a lot. We had the opportunity to be able to reach the masses and talk a lot about paternity and DNA testing, the importance of it, the importance of paternity, finding out who you are related to. It was amazing. I'm over here just feeling so full and so blessed right now. So yeah, that's it. I'm done.
And all I got to say is DNA 826. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Definitely make sure you spread that message. Roxy was showing a couple of the memes that we created for this movement. We're going to start sharing those on our Facebook channel as well. So please feel free to share them, spread the word, and you're gonna hear more about 826. So everybody stay tuned. We appreciate you all coming out tonight. Thank you all, and you all have a great evening.
Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.